Welcome to Industry Vancouver, conversations about the residential real estate industry with Andrew Hasman and Jeff Benna.
Good morning, Jeff.
Andrew, good morning. How are you?
And fantastic. We're right in the midst of a tariff storm from the U.S. and also in the midst of a very contentious federal election here in Canada. Holy smokes. There's a lot of tense situations going on. If you've watched social media, you listen to the news and talk to people, it's very polarized, right? Very polarized.
There's a lot going on. Yeah. And even the city by-election on Saturday, we went down to vote and there was a lineup and I thought, oh my God, this is great. Like there's so many people out here. Everybody's participating and they're right into it. I went and did a little quick research. There was almost 70,000 ballots cast out of 450,000 registered voters. So not great as far as turnout, but a lot higher than the 50,000 that were cast in the last by-election. So
that tells you that people wanted to make their vote count, I guess.
Yes.
And we thought we'd get there and it'd be, straight in. It was 45-minute wait.
Yeah.
And I was going through Kerrisdale at about 7:30 in the evening on Saturday. And the lineup out the community center and down the boulevard, I said to my mother-in-law who I was walking with, I said, that's got to be like an hour and 15-minute lineup to get in. And based on what we had to wait in the morning. And I think they didn't stop people from going. They cut off the lineup at 8 o'clock, but people were still voting, I think, well after 9 p.m. So I guess people wanted to make their vote count, their voice heard, whatever. And of course, I guess Ken Sims got a little bit of a wake-up call, right?
Well, you did. The Sean Orr from Cope got elected, Lucy Maloney from One City, the two ABC candidates well down the list.
Oh, yeah.
I think 6th and 7th place. So it felt like a bit of a report card for Mayor Ken.
Hey, look, he's been in now 2 years. It takes a long time to change policy and to change the way things are done. You can't do it in 2 years. You just can't do it, right? But I guess people are seeing the homeless problems and the crime and other issues, and they're saying these things aren't resolved. And so it's time for change already, right? Or it's at least time to send a message, right? So that gets us to the federal election.
So
we've had the Liberals in for 10 years. Justin Trudeau steps down. When he steps down the first week in January, or at least calls a leadership, he is polling, I think, at single digits. I mean, the Liberals are polling so low in the national polls. And then, of course, Carney gets elected the leader. And all of a sudden, I mean, the Liberals are back on top. They're leading by several percentage points. I mean, it's a whole new race again. And we could see the Liberals again get in for the fourth time. No one thought this was going to be the case 3 months ago. What a change. Wow.
There's been exterior forces galvanizing the Canadian experience, I think is what that is. And it's interesting for me. Like, I know our thing on these election reviews is to be completely agnostic about it. And as always, our standard disclaimer, we want to offer relevant, actionable information. This isn't investment advice or voting advice. We're better realtors than accountants, lawyers, and financial advisors. We are owners of Vancouver real estate. We like it when prices go up, and we make a fee when we help you. So just to reiterate, this is not an endorsement of any party or candidate, just our personal take on the platforms around housing, which we do know a little bit about.
Yeah, for sure. So let's delve into it. So we've got basically two parties, Liberals, Conservatives. They're polling, obviously, the two highest percentages of the five, I guess, parties. NDP are in quite a ways back, and then you've got the Green, the Blocs, and the People's Party of Canada at the tail. So we're going to go through these platforms party by party, correct?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Okay. You know what? Actually, why don't we leave the Conservatives and the Liberals for last?
Okay.
And we'll take a look at the other four to start.
Okay.
And that we can probably spend a little bit more time on the last two because they're going to have a bigger chunk of policy to talk about.
And you made a good point, Jeff. That is, even though the New Democrats are polling single digits and the Green parties are way down, they could make up some part of a coalition in a minority government where their voice could be heard. So even though they're not going to win the majority vote, their policies at some point could be somewhat relevant, potentially. So that's why it's a good idea, even though they're polling way down in the single digits, at least going through them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like for the Bloc, I was reminded of the phrase, "My Canada includes Quebec." And we shouldn't underestimate the impact they might have as a potential kingmaker in a more minority government, as you say.
Right.
Their primary sort of housing adjacent is they want immigration control for Quebec. So the Bloc seeks to grant Quebec the authority to select the majority of temporary immigrants under the International Mobility Program. And they want to have that control. They want to say what's going on in the province. And to their credit, that's how they go.
Okay. So that's all that came up for the Bloc Quebecois when it comes to housing, just controlling immigration.
Yeah, well, because it's so condensed for primarily Quebec. Like, so for a national housing policy, it could have the effect of, if they have workers that come in, that they might be able to build some more or build less, depending on what happens. If the federal government's policies are somehow taken into having that more people there or less people there, it's all just sort of adjacent, nothing specific. And similar to the People's Party of Canada, they're saying for their platform is a reduction in foreign aid, and then to use that money to fund domestic priorities, which could include housing initiatives.
So basically, they don't even have period because they're having to print the money or whatever. I mean, the government's in a massive, hole financially, but the money we're sending out as foreign aid, keep that money domestically and potentially use that for housing initiatives and other priorities.
Exactly.
Okay.
For the Green Party, their three main points were utilizing some federal land for housing, using some of that Crown land to construct what they're asking for is 100,000 rent-controlled housing units over the next decade, trying to increase the stock of affordable housing. I'm always cautious about government-run housing.
Really?
Development.
You don't think the government's good developers? Highly efficient?
No, I do not.
Yeah. I think this policy also shows up in some of the other parties that we're going to step on as touching as well.
It does.
Yeah.
And I would always say proceed with caution. Talk about the housing retrofits. They want to retrofit 3 million some odd homes across Canada to improve energy efficiency, reduce living costs, and contribute to environmental sustainability. Well, yes, I'm behind all of those things. And once again, I'm just always cautious about government trying to do things. They're not in the business of doing that. And the expertise can often lead to cost overrun, inefficiency. Just they don't know what they don't know, right?
Failed project. Yeah, they're not developers. Yeah, for sure.
One other interesting point that the Greens had too was redefining affordable housing. So for clear and standardized definition of affordable housing to ensure that the policies effectively target those in need. I think that's a great idea. I know the city of Vancouver has stopped using the word affordable when they're talking about housing because it doesn't really speak to what the issues are. We need more housing. We need more housing that people can afford and live in, but just calling it affordable housing,
what do they call it in
really
Vancouver? There's market housing, which is market rent or whatever.
Yeah.
And what are they calling affordable then in Vancouver?
Do you know what? I don't know if they're calling it non-market housing or just housing, or the missing middle is a term that gets thrown around a lot.
You're right. Okay. Fair enough then. So that gets to the Green Party, the Bloc Quebecois, and the People's Party. So now we're talking about the New Democratic Party, who are polling right now in the single digits. That could change. There's 3 weeks left in the election. A lot can change between now and then. And as we know, going back to the previous Liberal term, the New Democrats and the Liberals got together to form a government that would actually be, which would hold, as opposed to the Liberals just trying to operate on their own as a minority. So a lot of the New Democrat policy found its way into government, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So they're on the same path. They want to unlock public land for affordable housing. Great. To utilize that to build affordable, once again, rent-controlled homes. I caution with rent-controlled as well. Like if I'm a tenant, I love the idea of my rent not going up, but there's a lot of sort of knock-on effects of rent controls that cause uncontrolled rise disproportionately in sort of open market. It reduces liquidity in the market. It reduces people moving. Like, I get it, why you'd want that. And it has a knock-on effect that actually makes it worse for probably more people than it helps.
Yeah, fair enough then. And again, as a real estate investor, you really don't want to play in a market where you have little control over rents, and yet your rights are diminished dramatically in order to make a profit and cover your risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? Think about the places where you've invested, where there's less rent controls and there's a lot less disparity between market rents and the rents that many people are in.
Yeah.
We hear stories all the time about New York rent controlled apartments that are a tenth of the cost of what they are, but that disparity causes the prices to spike up on the ones that are in the open market.
Yeah, fair enough then. Yeah.
The NDP also is talking about a ban on corporate landlords.
Wow.
Prohibiting corporate landlords from purchasing affordable homes, aiming to prevent the commodification of housing and ensure homes remain accessible to individuals and families.
So who's going to be the landlord then? If corporations aren't allowed, who's the landlord?
That's unclear to me. One of the things I was talking to a client of mine about this, and one of the things that we sort of noted is with so much of the emphasis towards tenants' rights, there is the problem if you're a mom and pop operator, you've bought a single apartment that you want to rent out to your kids or rent out for now until you maybe pass it on to your kids or have your mom or your dad live in it or whatever you want to do. There is always the chance that you might get a difficult tenant. You might get a problem tenant. You don't have the capacity to have them get out, or you've got to wait 6 months or a year before that actually happens.
Right.
As a single individual investor, you're hard pressed to be able to manage a situation where you've got, I'm not saying it happens all the time, but when it does happen, like it could be financially catastrophic for that person who's owning that. Whereas a company, a corporation, somebody who owns and manages hundreds of units, they've got the processes built in place so that they can manage that one tenant situation. We want to encourage people to buy secondary units. We want to encourage people to rent them out, increase the supply. And by banning corporate landlords, you're taking the biggest player who's going to provide the most supply out of the picture and taking away all the possibility of efficiencies, making sure that everybody's rights are protected and that there's a proper process involved for all the things that are going on.
You got to provide incentive. Otherwise, if the investor has no incentive, the investor's not. It's like what's going on in the pre-sale condo market right now. Investors usually make up a huge chunk of the initial purchase.
Yes.
The developer can get their construction financing, but that market has been decimated by a lot of government policy. And of course, with the numbers not working. And so if the investors aren't buying, you can't get liftoff. You can't get development. You can't get condos being built or properties being built. You need that corporate and that money to basically build the properties.
So once again, for me, though, it's a question of villainizing the person most likely to add solution just because it's politically expedient. I'm not a fan of that. The other thing, support for nonprofit housing providers. They intend to provide more assistance to nonprofits involved in housing, fostering community-driven solutions to the housing crisis. So yes, I'm absolutely in favor of that. Some of the different housing co-ops around and the housing societies, they're doing an amazing job and doing great things. And any support that you can lend that way to them, it is much appreciated by them, and I think is definitely a solution in the right direction.
Okay. All right. So that takes us to the Conservative Party of Canada. We'll finish off with the Liberals because they're the ones that are polling the highest percentage in the current election cycle. So Conservative Party of Canada, some of these actually, the one I'm really interested in is the capital gains tax deferral. But so they're proposing the GST to be removed on new construction up to 1.3 million. So that basically for Vancouver, so it's not going to include single family homes for the most part. Is going to include more sort of condos and townhomes, obviously in certain areas more than others, but that definitely makes things a little bit more affordable for first time buyers and people looking to buy new construction, correct?
It does.
Yeah.
Particularly in the condo market. And this is applicable to all buyers,
Okay.
not just first-time buyers.
Yeah. Thank you for making that point. That's correct. So, yeah, on $1 million, you're going to save a good chunk of money. Is it
$50,000? And at 1.3, it's 65,000. And if you're an investor and you're buying a couple of units, smaller ones to rent out, or one fair-sized one to rent out, 65,000 on the cost side, that's not nothing.
Yeah, it all helps make it a bit more affordable. The other thing keep that in mind though, if you make it more affordable, you potentially increase demand, which potentially increases price. So it can also work counter to what you're trying to do as well, right?
It can counter a little bit. I think the thing that we're seeing right now is there's quite a lot of unsold inventory out there. And my hearing from many people who are renting properties, our clients who are renting properties out, and that the rents are softening and are starting to come down a little bit.
Yeah, we're seeing that for sure. No question. Okay, tax-free savings account incentives. They're proposing to increase the annual TFSA contribution by $5,000. So that'll make the contribution now, will that make it up to $12,000 a year annually? Is that right? Because right now it's $7,000.
I think that's right.
To $12,000. I can't remember who did it. It might have been Stephen Harper way back. There was a 1 year where you were allowed to put in, I think, $10,000, and then the Liberals, I think, took it away.
They took it away.
So at $12,000, that's great. I mean,
it is. Now, the caveat on that, though, Andrew, is that it has to be invested in Canadian businesses.
That's okay.
And that's designed to encourage some domestic investment and bolster the economy.
That's great. We need more investment in Canada. We need to get the Canadian engine fired up. And so I think that's a great thing. You know, keep the money here in Canada. I think this Buy Canada thing right now is fantastic. I mean, everyone's patriotic, and I think it's fantastic helping Canadian businesses. But this tax-free savings where you can invest potentially an additional $5,000, but it has to be in Canadian businesses. Well, there's many great Canadian businesses that I consider to be great investments. So keep the money here. What a phenomenal incentive to bolster the Canadian economy. Great idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, talking about a capital gains tax deferral.
I love this one.
Individuals or businesses that reinvest proceeds into Canadian assets within 18 months. I mean, that is a huge window. When they have the tax deferred exchange in the US, you've got a very limited time frame. You've got to name the buildings that you're going to trade up or exchange to. And 18 months, I mean, the policy details will be very important in this, but if you're just selling one thing and buying another thing and
having to pay
you've got 18 months to do it, fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I mean, if the US have had this, it's called a 1031 exchange. That makes up a lot of business down in the States where people have sold something, they've got to reinvest the money. And if they do within a certain amount of time, there's no capital gains. It gets deferred down the road. But I think what a great way. I mean, how many investors do you know they'll sell a property or they'll want to sell, but they don't sell because they know they're going to have to pay a whack of tax to CRA, and that money's gone. Like, it's just gone, right? So if you can actually trade out of something and trade into something that's bigger and better, and maybe you're going to value add, you're going to renovate a property and add value and not have to pay tax on the transaction, I think what a great incentive.
Well, anytime you're increasing liquidity like that, you're also increasing the opportunity for those affordable rentals to be built up, made better. A new owner comes in, wants to do some capital expenditure and that sort of thing. Somebody else can move on to another project, or depending if you need to actually put it back into property or if you can just invest it in Canadian stocks, somebody exiting the market might be more inclined to do that, give somebody else the opportunity to build up and offer a better rental. There's all kinds of great things about that.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. Tax-free savings account, GSTs. I actually like what the Conservatives have proposed. I think all three are great ways to sort of stimulate, give people incentive to invest and also trade up. So I think that's, to me,
I like all that.
That's well thought out. Okay. Liberal Party of Canada, and they're in the lead right now. They are taking, I think if the election was to be held today, I've been told they would form a majority government with their 44% percentage of the vote. But again, there's 3 weeks to go. A lot can happen. And so,
and polls aren't always correct.
Polls aren't always correct.
As of late.
Yeah. So we'll just see how it all plays out. But you go ahead, Jeff. Let's talk about the first one.
So, elimination of GST for first-time home buyers. So this is the difference between the Conservatives and the Liberals. They're saying $1 million or below for first-time home buyers, no GST.
Okay. So basically, in Vancouver, or Greater Vancouver, that's really just condos, maybe some townhomes a bit further out. And again, it's only first-time buyers. So if you're a trade-up buyer, this does not include you. It's just a first-time buyer up to $1 million. In our market, Jeff, that's really just entry-level 1s and 2s bedrooms.
In Vancouver, yes, but
no.
Vancouver adjacent, that's, in some cases it's a townhouse or a small 2-bedroom townhouse, 2-bedroom apartment, 1-bedroom apartment, lots of new and exciting properties out there for people who don't need to or don't want to live right in the Vancouver.
And again, we're talking about the whole country of Canada here. So again, if you're in other provinces, that may very well be, I'm sure it is, a new home, right? A new suburb.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking of the whole country, it's a different picture than just Vancouver. No question about it.
Yes. But I like to be very self-centered.
Well, this is what we work with, Jeff. I mean, our clients that are watching us here, for the most part, are all in Greater Vancouver, for the most part. So that's
or have an interest in Vancouver or friends here.
Yeah, exactly.
Who we're happy to help, I should mention.
Yeah. We're only a phone call away.
That's right.
Or an email. Okay.
Their next thing is they want to double housing construction, to double the annual rate of new home construction to nearly 500,000 units. The commentary on this is this ambitious goal is intended to address the housing supply shortage and make homes more affordable.
Am I correct, Jeff? I have heard, now again, I should have checked the stat before I came on because I've heard this countless times before, that Canada, I think in its record year of building housing construction, I think we hit, and I could be wrong, so very wrong, something like 270,000 units in 1 year. That's the most we've ever built in 1 year. So 500 is almost double that. Is that realistic?
I'm hearing that too.
Yeah.
Like all things, the proof of the policy will be in the execution. So we'll see, I guess, is what it is.
Yeah. And I've also heard, listening to news feeds, that we don't even have the trades to actually build that many units in Canada. We don't have the plumbers and the electricians and the carpenters to get that kind of lift off, to get that kind of numbers. It's just not realistic. It's like when the Liberal government came up with a policy a year ago, the housing minister, they were going to build so many millions of homes by 2030. And when you looked at the math, it just completely was unrealistic.
Impossible.
It was impossible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's gone by the wayside. That didn't last long. But anyhow, so you can come out with numbers. You can pull numbers out of your hat, wherever they come from. But 500,000 just seems a little bit excessive and unrealistic. I think the maximum number that was built in 1 year was something like 270,000. I could be wrong, but I think that was a number. So they're aiming to say we can double that. Okay, we'll see.
And you know what, Andrew, here's the other thing with that, though. I think it's great to have a lofty goal like that. I think it starts looking at the supply side again, which, anything to control demand and restrict purchasing. We've tried that for the last 25 years and it doesn't seem to have worked.
Yeah.
So if we're getting back to the supply side, I guess that's great. And if you can coordinate it with job creation programs, training for skills, let people know that here's a great, well-paying job that you don't have to go and be a computer techie. You don't have to go and, whatever else that you might consider doing. Like if you can learn a trade, you can make a career, you can raise a family, you could do these things. Like these are well-paying jobs that if they're building 500,000 homes here, there's going to be employment.
Listen, it all looks good on paper. Let's see if they can actually execute it. So that's the name of the game, right?
Absolutely.
You can say whatever you want. Is it realistic? Wait and see. Okay.
That's right. The last thing on their point, establish Build Canada Homes. A new entity, Building Canada Homes, is proposed to oversee and expedite housing projects, ensuring efficient use of resources and timely completion of developments. Once again, sounds great. I'm always apprehensive for a government program saying that they're going to increase efficiency.
This is the government getting into the developing business, I guess, right?
Well, at least overseeing it, but unless there's skin in the game, I think it's really difficult to make that work. So my take is the job of government is to provide a landscape where capital can meet the needs of what the market says it wants and needs, right?
Correct. You create the incentive to go out and invest, take risk, and build, right?
Yeah, and offer a helping hand directionally and with programs to make sure that everything's coordinated. But actually taking on the role of developer, I'm very suspect of that.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think what government needs to do, as we just discussed, is create an environment where investment will flourish. People will want to invest because there's a reasonable expectation they can earn a profit, not be taxed to death, and not be regulated to death as well, right? That's a big deal. So yeah, I mean, obviously outside of housing, there's lots of other government, each party has other policies on their platforms as well. We're just sort of focusing on the housing end of things here. There's roughly about, is it 3 weeks left in the election? Is it the 28th? Is that the day?
28th. Yeah, there's exactly 3 weeks.
Okay, so we're 3 weeks out. Going to be interesting to see. I think a lot of Canadians have they're tuned into what's going on. They're watching the leaders scurry back and forth across the country and hearing what they have to say. And at the same time, trying to navigate what's going on south of the border with respect to what's going on in the U.S. and how that's impacting and affecting the global economy and just everything in general. That's the talk of the.
Well, it is.
And conversation.
It just goes to show me, Andrew, that uncertainty is a killer.
Yeah.
If there's a clear path, if there's understanding and respect for what is about to happen and what can happen, I think that's going to go great lengths to making the situation much better.
Well, let's hope that what's going on with the tariffs does start to settle down. I got to think at some point things will settle down. We get the election behind us. It would be ideal if we got a new majority government in just so that they can govern properly, right? And that gets behind us. So we really go from kind of a bit of a lethargic spring market, if at best, as that's what you can call it, to maybe more of a robust, more active summer market. It'll be interesting to see if that actually plays out. Or are we waiting till the fall to see what happens in the fall? Because obviously it's been an interesting 2.5 months since really the end of January here in Vancouver. Right?
A clear mandate, majority government, a clear path forward, solid policies. I think that's really the best we can hope for right now.
Yeah. And that way people can make some decisions, not thinking that all of a sudden there's going to be another shift in policy. It seems like it's happening, every hour on the hour, there's something else coming out of the news wires. So yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're all going to be just fine. We all need to take a deep breath and realize that real estate in our neck of the woods has had decades of incredible performance. Price appreciation, been phenomenal. So we take a few steps back, maybe a slight correction, if it's slight, is a healthy thing as well, right? Is a healthy thing. Nothing goes up forever.
Do you know what? Any opportunity for more people to get on the ladder, start experiencing the benefits of ownership plays well for the community, for the city, for the province, and also for the country.
Yeah. I want to make one other point, just shifting a bit back, is with what's going on south of the border, with all this uncertainty, we've seen the 5-year Canadian and US bond yields fall off quite a bit in the last few weeks. So now it looks like you can go out and get a 5-year fixed mortgage under 4%.
Fantastic.
In Canada. So we're seeing under 4% mortgages. Those were about 4.4%, I think, about 6 weeks ago. So we've seen a bit of a drop in long-term or fixed mortgage rates. So
again, I met with some buyers this week and they just had their pre-approval at 3.99.
Well, there you go. So that's fantastic. So that definitely is going to help stimulate as well. We get some of this uncertainty behind us. The lower interest rates definitely help the market and create a bit more of a positive sentiment. And I got to think if this tariff uncertainty hangs over us, that maybe the Bank of Canada drops another 25 points. When is the next meeting? Do we know when the next meeting is?
Wednesday, April 16th.
Okay. Oh, wow. So it's really coming up quickly.
Yeah. Bank of Canada interest rate announcement, monetary policy report. Yeah. It's actually before the election.
Okay. So we've seen so much erosion in the stock market. They're calling now a 60% chance of recession. Given what's happened in the last week. Bank of Canada is meeting in basically a week. So do they hold? Do they cut? They're obviously not going to raise, that's for sure. But again, another cut, further helps stimulate lending activity in the real estate market. So that'll be interesting to see over the next week what happens there. Just so you know, after we voted on Saturday in the Civic, we walked around the corner and Jill and I actually voted in the federal. You can actually vote right now. But what they told us is all the ridings haven't yet set their candidates.
Yes.
So they gave us a special ballot with nothing written on it. And you actually have to know who the candidate was in your area.
Yes.
You had to write that person's name in order to vote. And we knew who it was. So we went ahead and voted. So we're sort of off the hook. So we did our early voting. But yeah, so Monday the 28th. Don't wait till Tuesday.
Monday the 28th, yes.
It'll be too late.
Or vote in advance.
Okay. Because if you don't vote, you can't complain.
You can't complain, yes. So what's the other one? Vote early and vote often.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you got it. Jeff, okay, so listen, so 3 weeks to the election. This is great. Let's see how this plays out. It'll be great to get this uncertainty behind us. And I do think the tariff thing will slowly start to right itself. I can't see how the government is going to allow in the US this crazy uncertainty just to sort of linger, because markets don't like when they can't figure out what's going on, right? So let's hope. And with the Bank of Canada rate decision coming next week, maybe a 25-point cut, we'll see. That hopefully helps. So, okay, spring market behind us. Let's hope for an active summer market, but in the worst way, let's hope for things to settle down and start to get better.
Excellent. And one topic I think we should probably start to explore over the next little while is some strategies for buying well. And if you do find yourself in competition, how you can set yourself apart as a buyer with your offer, the different components of that, and ways that you can do a better job for yourself.
Because we're talking Vancouver, there's no question multiple offers will come back sooner before you think.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, Jeff. Great chat this morning.
Yeah, very nice. I like it. Everybody remember to do your homework and remember to vote. I'm Jeff Benna.
I'm Andrew Hasman.
This is Industry Vancouver.
See you soon.
Thanks for tuning in today. We appreciate your time and your attention. If we can be of further help or information, we look forward to hearing from you. We respectfully acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.